So there I was browsing Reddit when I happened upon this thread. A Genshin player is getting sued in China for Tower of Fantasy misinformation by Perfect World Games. Holy crap. This thread was initially opened over on the Tower of Fantasy subreddit. But the reason why I'm covering this, I was going to ignore this thread because honestly, I don't think there's any way for me as an outsider to fully understand and grasp what is going on, as I haven't personally been involved in this. And while I do plan on taking a look and reading through the information present, my Tower of Fantasy fans my Tower of Fantasy fans who allow me to live rent-free in their head all day, every day, all but forced me to cover this. And I just want you guys to know here that some of these Tower of Fantasy players actually believe you guys are I'm so sorry. Before we jump into this video though, I do want to thank all of our incredible patrons over on Patreon. You guys do not need to support Mrs. Stix and I, but you still choose to, and trust me, it is appreciated beyond anything I can convey verbally. You guys are incredible, and admittedly, if you have a moment, follow Mrs. Stix and I over on Twitter. We'd really appreciate that. So, apparently, there is this guy, 8eggs. He is a content creator that supposedly does some Genshin content, not exclusively Genshin content, but some Genshin content. He made a video over on YouTube going on to state that Tower of Fantasy and Perfect World Games are suing him. This thread in specific goes on to elaborate a little bit here as to what's going on. So according to this Reddit thread, the person in specific, 8eggs, is going to go to court in China on the 30th of November. The reason is that they are being sued by Perfect World Games for misinformation that is related to the Chinese ID incident. This is something that happened much earlier this year. For the context about the Chinese ID incident, basically there were some players on the Discord server back in January 2022, or at least really close to that, sharing out IDs that allowed you to play Tower of Fantasy on the Chinese server. Much like there are plenty of people today that still play Tower of Fantasy on the Chinese server using Chinese IDs. This was discovered because S3 in China was full of Russians for some reason. After investigation, they came across the server with the people that were impersonating TapTap people. However, the user hastily accused the official service of doing this thing and doubled down on the misinformation. The thing here is that it is a very serious accusation in China, especially because of the specifics involved. It is illegal to exchange IDs to foreigners to gain access to the original server. That is why Perfect World Games denied the allegations. You must know the following: this kind of thing would likely prompt an investigation from the Chinese police and security department, and I don't think the game would have lived for much longer. No matter how you put it, it is extremely illegal. TapTap then proceeded to make these two posts afterwards. So this was TapTap's official statement. They seem to have highlighted one part in specific, and that is around here. After verification, it is reported that the ID card information distributed in the Discord group has multiple public web sources, and overseas users can directly search for relevant pages with the help of search engines. TapTap strongly condemns the dissemination and theft of identity information and emphasizes that TapTap employees have never disseminated any identity information, including the above list. The international version of TapTap captures and includes the Huanta National Server page. The developer registered logo here refers to the developer of the Huanta National Server, who has settled in the TapTap domestic version, not the official Huanta settled in the international version. The moderator and certification of the TapTap international version of the Magic Tower community, Magic Tower being Tower Fantasy, has nothing to do with the Tower Fantasy official. After communicating with Perfect World Games, Tower Fantasy currently has no plans to open an international server, and related matters will be negotiated separately. So going back to the thread here, TapTap and Perfect World Games did not get fined. What does this mean? Well, the person had lied about the ID thing to make the game look bad. But in China, it is easy to spread misinformation, and I don't think really that's necessarily specific to China. And of course, being the hottest thing, it had spread out to Western players. Because of him, Tower Fantasy got its reputation damaged just from a no, Tower Fantasy did not get its reputation damaged from a false rumor. Tower Fantasy had its reputation damaged from a variety of sources: theft, plagiarism, poor management and mishandling of the game, hackers, exploiters, abusers. Its reputation was damaged beyond repair, not from a dude spreading a false rumor. And it will take time to recover their reputation. This is the same person who also posted this with the translation. Foreigners call Yuanshen killer. How hot is the Phantom Tower overseas? A video tells you. Oh, right. So Yuan Shen, I'm assuming, is Genshin Impact. Foreigners are calling this the Genshin killer. Tower of Fantasy, they literally, oh man, 205,000 views. That's impressive. They themselves literally built their entire reputation on being a competitor to Genshin Impact, just like Genshin Impact built their reputation on being a Breath of the Wild clone. The content of the video itself is about other journalists reviewing the game and giving the game a fair review. It is not by far the perfect game, but it has its own positive points. However, the title says that foreigners are calling the game a Genshin killer, and you know, a lot of players thought, and even leading up to the launch of Tower of Fantasy, literally the day before it launched, people were claiming Tower of Fantasy would be the Genshin killer, the competition that Genshin finally needed. And admittedly, they were wrong. I have yet to see evidence that Tower of Fantasy called themselves a Genshin killer. They did mention that they were a competitor, I believe. Yeah, exactly. That's what I stated, that they were building themselves up as direct competition for Genshin. But I have seen zero evidence of them mentioning Genshin killer. See, last link for slightly more context, I think it was during the beta that people said such things on YouTube, and I think that's where the stereotype comes from. No, the stereotype comes from the fact that it was being built as a Genshin competitor, and the fact that it shares a lot of similarities to Genshin. Just like Genshin was being called a Breath of the Wild clone. Unrelated note, at the launch, there were Genshin players who said that Tower of Fantasy was owned by Tencent. You can see it here. The TLDR is that while Tencent could buy Perfect World Games due to having good shares, it has no connection whatsoever with Perfect World Games or Tower of Fantasy in the Chinese version. It is as baseless as saying that Nintendo president owns or plays Genshin Impact. Well, you could argue that there's some sort of connection in global version since it's published by Ally, who is a subsidiary of Tencent, but in China, absolutely no way. In fact, this image proves that in the Chinese version, Genshin players have actually been the ones attacking Tower of Fantasy just because they thought it was associated with Tencent. Dude, Tower of Fantasy Genshin players, they have been attacking each other for literally since the game's inception. This is not news, and this is not a one-sided thing. Perfect World Games even had to issue a video explaining the differences between Tower of Fantasy and Genshin Impact. My opinion is, well, as heartless as it sounds, insert oh no anyways meme here, to say this, but I think the Eggs person deserves the lawsuit that he's getting, all because he's spread misinformation about the game. Because of him, the game will take a while to recover its reputation. It's only now starting out, all because of one single person. Guys, I'm gonna be honest with you here. This guy thinks that one person that mentioned that the game is a Genshin killer deserves to be taken to court for spreading misinformation about the game and single-handedly dealing so much damage to the game's reputation that over the entire course of the year, they have yet to recover. One single person over on Bilibili ruined the entire reputation of a video game. One person. Man, to wield that much power must be unbelievable. Or at least that's what I take from this. I can't necessarily confirm the validity of anything that is going on because I'm not directly involved in it. I can just give my opinion based purely off of what I'm reading online. But from what I'm reading, this is an absolutely crazy situation. Reading some of the comments though has been fun. This person being sued happens to be a Genshin content creator on Bilibili, but the entire thing could have been posted without mentioning Genshin at all. I told the Tower of Fantasy subreddit that, and some really didn't agree and started getting defensive. Reminded them stuff like this contributes to what results in the game's heavily mixed reputation. I'm also reminded why I don't like interacting with the communities of games that I enjoy. Exactly. You do not want to argue with the Tower of Fantasy community. Trust me, I have criticized Genshin Impact, and the Genshin Impact community knows that Genshin Impact has a lot of flaws, and they're like, oh no, Stix, totally, we agree. The game can be kind of shit. What you're talking about, it makes sense. I say the same thing about Tower of Fantasy. Like, how dare you say that about our game? Guys, criticism is not a bad thing. Because of him, Tower of Fantasy got its reputation damaged just from a false rumor and will take time to recover the reputation. Oh yeah, it sure was because of him, not due to the lots of bugs, the hacks, the greediness, hello $900 mount, and terrible development and management. Nominated best mobile game, yep. The TLDR, there is this one guy. He is at fault for people thinking that the game is bad. Inhales copium. It's a very good game. It's just this guy's misinfo, I swear. Thanks for the TLDR. And there we have the Tower Fantasy fan. Literally this entire thing, like, nowhere did this guy mention Genshin Impact, but this guy immediately feels the need to defend Tower of Fantasy by saying that it's better than Genshin. These people are everywhere, man. Now, again, I can't speak to the validity of this. All I can say is I'm surprised that this guy is being taken to court for spreading quote-unquote misinformation. I don't know whether he deserves to be taken to court or not, but I am more than happy here to bring this topic to the attention of everyone watching. And at the same time, want to point out that I would come up with a much better title than TOF developers sue Genshin player. That is unfortunately nowhere near catchy enough. But you know what? Thank you, all 100 of you that upvoted that. I appreciate that. I love the fact that you guys are always thinking of me. Now, if Tower of Fantasy or Genshin both are not your thing and you're not interested in this drama, you know what? Absolutely no problem. I got 2 different videos on screen right now that will totally be of interest to you, especially given all of you guys in this community are the exact same kind of person as me. Now, these 2 videos in question are pertaining to a game that I played recently that I think is absolutely incredible. This is a game that I think you totally need to play if you're interested in strategy gacha games. The other is a list of every confirmed gacha game that is coming this month, in the month of November 2022. These are games you need to be aware of and that you need to be playing.